What if the past had turned out differently?
The Green Bay Packers have won the Super Bowl.
I was told that playing in Green Bay was not an option.
With the 24th selection in the 2005 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers select Aaron Rodgers, quarterback, California.
And Mikowski appears hurt. Oh, Mikowski's in great pain, Ahmad.
And reliable sources now tell CBS Sports that Parcells is very close to accepting a Green Bay Packers offer.
Gentlemen, let me introduce to you the new head coach of the Green Bay Packers, Mr. Phil Bankston.
What would the past look like? What would the future look like? If. And actually on our Facebook page is where we got this episode's What If topic, and Matt's going to give that for us right now.
All right, so yeah, we got a great idea from Joseph Read It and Weep More. He said he thought it would be a great idea to talk about if the Packers had beaten the Broncos in Super Bowl 32. He says, do the Broncos potentially win 3 consecutive Super Bowls? Does that extend the Holmgren era? Does it enshrine Favre as the most notable Packer ever, etc.? So we'll kind of be talking on a little bit of that, but the topic being if the Packers win Super Bowl 32.
The 1996 Green Bay Packers were one of the greatest teams in Packers history and arguably one of the best teams of the Super Bowl era. They were one of only 2 Super Bowl champions to score the most points and allow the fewest throughout their championship season. They won half of their regular season games by 3 touchdowns or more and outscored their playoff opponents by more than 17 points per game. Their 2-time reigning NFL MVP quarterback Brett Favre was just 27 years old, and following the Super Bowl 31 championship, signed a contract that would keep him in Green Bay for years to come and make him the highest paid player in league history. Their brilliant head coach Mike Holmgren was just 48. Pivotal stars like Leroy Butler, Antonio Freeman, Mark Chmura, Dorsey Levens, Robert Brooks, and Gilbert Brown were all under the age of 30. A dynasty seemed inevitable. The Packers entered 1997 as the odds-on favorite to repeat as champions. Though not as dominant as their 1996 team, the 97 Packers still started with an 8-2 record to match the start of their championship counterparts, but they would lose an embarrassing shootout to the 0-10 Indianapolis Colts in mid-November. Following that setback, the Packers awoke and regained their championship form. They destroyed 7 straight opponents, allowing fewer than 12 points a game in those contests. The offense scored nearly 28 points per game during that stretch, and Brett Favre clinched his unprecedented 3rd straight league MVP award. The Packers were playing their best football in years and arrived in San Diego for Super Bowl 32 at the doorstep of dynasty. But no one told the Denver Broncos. The underrated, underappreciated, and 11-point underdog Broncos took it to the Packers in one of the most hard-fought physical Super Bowls in history. The Packers trailed 31-24 with just a minute 39 to play and 70 yards away from the tying score. The Packers put together a gutty drive, but Favre's final Super Bowl pass fell to the turf incomplete on 4th down and 8, and the Packers' instant dynasty fell 32 yards short. The following season, the Packers were still one of the best teams in football. Favre led the league in passing yardage. Antonio Freeman led in receiving yardage. Hall of Famer Reggie White won Defensive Player of the Year. But the pursuit of another championship was overshadowed by constant speculation over the future of Mike Holmgren. It had long been known that the coach wanted the chance to build his own winner, as both head coach and general manager. Despite a rough season filled with injuries and an overwhelming division challenger in the Minnesota Vikings, the Packers finished 11-5 and were still a dark horse to win Super Bowl 33. But the dream of 2 titles in 3 years died at Candlestick Park with just 3 seconds remaining as Steve Young hit Terrell Owens for the game-winning score to defeat the Packers 30-27. Within days, Reggie White was retired, and Mike Holmgren was the head coach and general manager of the Seattle Seahawks. Green Bay's dynasty was dead. But what if the Packers had won Super Bowl 32? Would that spark have propelled them to win another Super Bowl in 1998? Would Mike Holmgren have stayed in Green Bay to pursue a dynasty of unprecedented proportions? And how is Brett Favre's legacy different? What if the 1997 Packers had won Super Bowl 32? Okay, now that's the backstory on this What If segment. Thanks again, Joseph, for sending that in. I see Joseph is from Chattanooga, Tennessee, so we got Packer fans all over the country here, and we definitely appreciate you giving us this great idea for a What If segment. I guess I'll start this time around. The Packers, obviously, in 1997 were probably the best team in football. They weren't as good as they were in 96, but they were very, very good. That 11-point spread that they had for Super Bowl 32 actually is one of the more ridiculous spreads in Super Bowl history. Although the Packers, I believe, were a better team, the Denver Broncos in 1997 were very, very good. They were the highest scoring team in the NFL. They had a lot of really good things going for them. They had a 12-4 record, which is a very good record for a wild card team. So I think Denver, certainly, the loss to Denver is not as bad as it may have appeared at the time. But let's assume that the Packers do win the game. They were very, very close. Coming into 1998, believe it or not, the people remember Holmgren having his tumultuous 1998. Actually, there were rumors immediately following Super Bowl 32 that he was going to leave and go to Seattle, and he decided to stay in Green Bay. It was for the same reason he left in 1999. He had no ill will against the franchise. He really liked it here, but he wanted to give it a try at general manager. Him and Ron Wolf even had a pretty good working relationship. He just wanted to be able to have that role. So 1998, they obviously had a very good team, a Super Bowl contender. 98 is one of those really weird years where Minnesota, of course, highest scoring team of all time at the time, dominated that division and quite frankly made the Packers look pretty bad in both of the losses to them that year. Atlanta, 14-2, a very strange team that year as well. The Green Bay Packers, of course, went 11-5. That's the year that Dorsey Levens came off the 1,400-yard season and broke his ankle early in the season. They had absolutely no running game. They did have a very, very good year from Antonio Freeman. That was the first year under Holmgren since Brett Favre really reformed himself that he started to have interception problems again. He did lead the NFL in passing yards. With 4,200. He had 31 touchdowns, but he also threw 23 interceptions. Like I said, Antonio Freeman, very good. He was an all-pro that year. 84 catches, 1,424 yards, 14 touchdowns. Was near the top of the league at all of those. That's the year Roel Preston was very good for them as a kick returner. And Reggie White was the Defensive Player of the Year with 16 sacks. So they certainly had a lot of talent that year. Quite frankly, if they win Super Bowl 32, I don't think 1998 changes a whole heck of a lot. I think that the Minnesota Vikings kind of caught lightning in a bottle that year. The Atlanta Falcons were pretty good. The Packers just had a lot of problems in 1998, and I don't think them losing the Super Bowl in 97 really changed that 98 team very much, especially considering the fact that the Packers really lost a very hard-fought game to a team that proved they were pretty good. I mean, remember Denver was 13-3 in 96, so it wasn't exactly like losing to some crummy loser 9-7 New York team that had no business even being in the playoffs. It was losing to a team that had established themselves the year before as one of the best in the NFL. Terrell Davis was very good. They had Neil Smith on defense. They had Steve Atwater. They had Bill Romanowski. They had some really good players. So I think that the Packers losing wasn't seen as this horrible thing that kept big-time free agents away or really destroyed their confidence all that much. I honestly think that 1998 goes the same whether or not the Packers are the defending Super Bowl champions or not. And I think Mike Holmgren would have left. Let's say they win the Super Bowl. Maybe they win back-to-back. I still think Holmgren leaves after 1998. I still think Favre has a lot of the same problems going forward. I don't see the team changing all that much. So, honestly, I think if the Packers win Super Bowl 32, it's certainly more fun for Packer fans. But I think 1998, maybe they win a game or two more. I think maybe if they won one more game, let's say they have a boost of confidence or something, and they win one more game, they get to host San Francisco. I think then they'd win. Maybe they get to go play Atlanta. If anything, if they win one more game in 98, I think they could beat Atlanta, and then maybe the Minnesota Vikings have a Super Bowl in their arsenal. Because I recently, within the last 5 years, just seen both of those 1998 Packer games, and they get beat up really bad. I mean, they look like they're not even in Minnesota's league that year, and so I don't think that would have changed too much. So honestly, I think if the Packers win Super Bowl 32, the Packers' history is nearly identical, except Packers have 2 Super Bowls instead of 1. I think Brett Favre is probably remembered a little bit more fondly, but even with 2 Super Bowl wins, I still think people would remember him as kind of a choke artist in the second half of his season. I still think they get rid of him in favor of Aaron Rodgers, so I don't think this one has the far-reaching implications that some of the other events in Packers history have.
Yeah, and I hate to do this for the sake of a debate, but I agree with pretty much everything you said. That's pretty much everything that I was thinking coming into it. I think Holmgren leaves either way. Winning 2 Super Bowls or winning 1 Super Bowl probably doesn't make too much of a difference if after the 98 season we get knocked out. He just wanted to be a general manager, and we weren't going to let him do that. I know that Ron Wolf retired a year after that, and I was reading some reports today that if they would have known that, they would have really liked to offer Holmgren the GM spot there too, but they didn't. Mm-hmm. But so I don't think winning a Super Bowl there really changes anything. I don't think they would have kicked Ron Wolf out to let Holmgren be the GM if they didn't know Wolf was planning on retiring or moving on. So, I think I agree. We look back on that Super Bowl now, and it doesn't seem like as big of an upset as it did then. That Denver team was extremely talented, and maybe even more talented than the '97 Packers team was. Mm-hmm. When you look back on some of the Hall of Famers or some of the great players that they had. So they win the Super Bowl there, like you said. Packer fans are happy that we have 5 Super Bowls now instead of 4. The Favre era is probably looked back on maybe a little better just because he won that extra ring. Mm-hmm. But in terms of his overall career, it probably doesn't change a whole lot. So I think things really turn out pretty much the same, like you said. I think Holmgren still goes. I think the Packers are pretty much right where they are today, other than maybe we're a little happier that it happened this way because, like you said, maybe the Vikings would have ended up, winning a Super Bowl if we ended up, maybe finishing a game or so better the next year. But I agree. I think this is one. I think it's a great topic because we haven't really talked about this time period, but I really don't think that, other than us having an extra Super Bowl ring, it makes a huge difference in where we are now. So obviously having that extra ring at the time is a huge difference in Packer history. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the follow-up and what happened afterwards, I don't think it has too much of an effect.
Yeah, and I guess maybe for the sake of just kind of spicing this up a little bit, let's just say, for instance, that Ron Wolf decides to call it a career after winning back-to-back Super Bowls. And they do offer the job to Mike Holmgren, and he does become the GM. How do you think that changes the Packers' future? I don't think that would have happened, honestly. I think Ron Wolf really wanted to stay. He probably wanted to see if he could win a third, but let's say he does retire and they give Holmgren the job, and so he never goes to Seattle. He stays in Green Bay. How do you think that affects the Green Bay Packers going forward if Mike Holmgren is here long-term beyond 1998?
Okay. Well, obviously, the draft's probably completely changed, which is impossible to speculate on, who Holmgren would have taken instead.
Yeah.
In those couple of years. So maybe it changes a little bit there. I think Brett's development, I want to say that he maybe keeps developing a little bit better and doesn't throw as many picks as he did the next few seasons, but we saw in 98 it kind of started to happen with Holmgren. So, it's hard to say exactly how long Mike would have been around for after that. You look at what he's done since. He was in Seattle and he left there, and now he's in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to speculate on how long he would have stayed or what would have changed. The history would definitely be different. There's no doubt about that. It's just kind of difficult to say. I don't think we would have won another Super Bowl in there after that with the teams we had. But it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to speculate, I guess, for me.
That's kind of what I was getting at too. Is I think that's what people wonder a lot, and I don't think they wonder that as much anymore now that Holmgren's not coaching and they don't play him every season, and that the Packers have a really good coach now and they have a really good quarterback and they've won a Super Bowl since Holmgren and Favre have left. But obviously, he was in Seattle a long time. I think he was actually ended up being in Seattle longer than he was in Green Bay. And I still think he's a really, really good coach, but I'm on board with you. I don't think they win another Super Bowl with Mike Holmgren. I think they had a really, really good team that Ron Wolf put together to win in the 90s. If anything, I would imagine that if they hadn't won in 96 and then they hadn't won in 97, they would have taking the team apart after 98 anyways. I mean, that team really built itself a nice window to win from about 94 to 98, and then after that, I mean, look at all the new faces that were on the team. I mean, look at that 98 Holmgren team, and then look at Sherman's first team in 2000 and how drastically different it is. And then look at Holmgren's team from 2002. I know 4 seasons is a long time in the NFL, but that 2002 team doesn't look anything like that 1998 team, and that's not that difference. I mean, the difference between that, the 2002 team and the 98 team is the difference between today's team and the 08 team with Aaron Rodgers and all the guys we have now. So I really think that either way, Holmgren would have had to rebuild the team. I don't think it would have been drastically different. I can't imagine as far as his picks being much worse than Mike Sherman's. And like I said, I think Mike Sherman's a pretty good coach. I think Holmgren's a better coach. So I think, honestly, I think their playoff history is pretty darn similar. And you look at what he did with Seattle, I think the Packers are there every year. Maybe they make it in 99. Maybe they make it in 2000. Maybe they have a 49ers-like run of making the playoffs every year, but I really don't think they seriously challenge to win the Super Bowl many other times with Holmgren as the head coach.